Hello, my dear students, in our topic number 4, GATS and financial services. In this topic, we start with the first item, background. In case of background, we present the historical background about the world trading system since the year 1947 till now. The first term, GATT. GATT stands for General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade. GATT first signed in the 1947 and finished in the 1994. So from 1947 to 1994 we talk about GATT. GATT managed the world trading system in this time or in this period from 1947 to 1994 as a result of Bretton Woods Conference. So generally, what about the aims of GATT? Number one, GATT to provide an international forum. The first aim for GATT to provide an international forum between countries participated in the GATT. Number two, to support and encourage free trade. To support and encourage free trade between countries participated in the GATT. Number three, to regulate and reduce the tariffs on traded goods. So this is the first mission for GATT, how we can regulate the international trade or the world trade. The last, trade disputes, we talk about a common mechanism for resolving any trade problems between countries participated in GATT. But what about the main vision? The main vision for GATT, how we create free trade. In case of free trade, remove or limit the trade barriers on imports and exports. The term round. In this case, countries participated in GATT joined round of negotiation. So we can define round as a set of negotiation between countries participated in GATT. Countries participated in GATT joined the round or negotiate about what? Negotiate about trade problems. And this time, from 1947 and before 1994, we talk about the main problem in the early stage of GATT. This is tariff problem. The tariff problem is the main problem in the early stage of GATT. What about waves of negotiation? Generally, GATT covered 3 waves of negotiation and included 8 rounds. So, wave of negotiation include maybe more than 1 round. Maybe one wave of negotiation include more than 1 round. So the first wave of negotiation started in 1947 and finished in the 1951. In this wave, we can call this is the wave related to phrase wave. This is the first wave. We can call this is phrase wave. What do we mean by phrase wave? All countries joined the GATT agreed to froze the tariff levels. So in this stage or in the first wave of negotiation, countries participated in negotiation agreed to constant or to set a constant levels of negotiation or phrase negotiation. The second wave started from 1959 to 1979. In the second wave of negotiation, we talk about the reduction wave. What about the reduction wave? Countries joined the GATT agreed to reduce the tariffs level. So the first wave, countries accept to freeze the tariffs. In the second wave of negotiation, countries joined the GATT agreed to decrease or reduce the tariffs level. The third wave of negotiation started in 1986 to 1994. The third wave we can call the modern wave of negotiation. Why modern wave? Because the third wave included modern topics, covered modern topics in trade negotiation, like trade and services, trade and investment, and trade in agriculture goods. So the most important wave, this is wave number 3, started from 1986 to 1994. Mainly in the wave number 3, we talk about only one round, Uruguay round. Only one round of negotiation, Uruguay round, which started in 1986 to 1994. The main output of wave number 3 of negotiation, or the Uruguay round, creation of WTO. WTO stands for World Trade Organization. Started in the beginning of the year 1995. What about Ministerial Conference? The Ministerial Conference, the top decision maker in the WTO organization. Ministerial Conference, the top decision maker in the WTO. Ministerial Conference equal the ministers of trade, finance for each member in the WTO, meeting for ministerial conference minimum one ministerial conference in the every 2 years. Every 2 years, one ministerial conference at minimum. What about members till now? Members in WTO equal 164 members, representing over 98% of global trade. 164 members share over 98% of global trade volume. What about the budget? Budget of WTO equal 195.5 millions of Swiss franc. 195.5 millions of Swiss franc. In terms of US dollar, equal around 217 millions of dollars. 217 millions of dollars. This is the last budget or the recent budget of WTO. What about topics? WTO covers about 21 topics of international trade. Number of topics covered by the WTO equal 21 topics. For example, trade in goods, trade in services, intellectual properties, dispute settlement, regional trade agreements, building trade capacity, and accessions and competition, electronic commerce, environment, and all items related to environment and investment and trade finance. Around 21 topics covered by international trade. How the WTO or GATT before 1994, so from 1947 to 1994 we talk about GATT. Since the year 1995, we talk about WTO. How WTO regulate works. This depends on the principles. Principles. What about principles? Principles regulate the work of WTO. The first principle, most favored nation. MFN, most favored nation. According to this principle, there is non-discrimination in the treatments between members and another members. According to WTO, all WTO members as well as treats all its most favored nation the same, treats all the members. Suppose three members, USA and Germany and Egypt. Three members are members in the WTO. USA, Germany and Egypt. Suppose USA provide decreasing in tariffs for Egyptian products by 7%. At the same time, USA provide decreasing in tariffs for German products by 10%. In this case, there is a discrimination in treatment between USA and Egypt, tariff cut by 7%, from USA to Germany, tariff cut by 10%. So, based on MFN principle, Egypt maybe request 3% as the tariff to equal with Germany. Under some conditions in the work of WTO. The second principle, national treatment. In this principle, there is no discrimination between foreigners and nationals. In case of national treatment, non-discrimination between foreigners and nationals. Discrimination in what? Which categories may be discrimination we talk about? We talk about tax rate, we talk about procedures, we talk about some requirements for projects, for investment. So, any member or each member should deal with the foreigners as deal with the nationals. This is the national treatment principle. Market access principle. According to the market access, all members in WTO should facilitate the access to the domestic market. By limit any barriers for the foreign suppliers or foreign investors. According to the market access, each member in the WTO should facilitate the access to the market by limit any barrier to provide the goods and services and investment. Principle number 4, transparency principle. According to this principle, each member in the WTO should publish. So, in this principle, transparency principle, talk about the publishing process. Publishing what? Publishing all laws, all procedures, or fees, or requirements to set up new projects, to tariffs. Publish any tariffs law, any tariffs duties, to provide information for the foreign supplier for goods or services, and at the same time to provide any information and data for the foreign investors. What about importance of trade or trade in services? Importance of trade. Mainly, the importance of services sector. According to the value add term or a concept, services account about 50% of world trade. This is in terms of value add. In terms of volume of trade, trade and services account for 25% of the world trade in the year 2019. In our table number 10, the world exports in services and goods from the year 2005 to the year 2019. According to the year 2005, what about the volume of the world exports of services equal 2.5 trillions of dollars? 2.5 trillions of dollars. What about the world exports of goods? 10.3 trillions of dollars. So when we compare the year 2005 with the year 2019, what about the value of the world exports of services equal 6 trillions of dollars compared with the 18.7 trillions of dollars for goods? So the gross rate, when we compare 2.5 to the 6, in this case the world exports of services doubled more than 2 times, doubled by more than 2 times. In case of goods, 10.3, when we compare with the 18.7, the same, doubled, but lower than 2 times, lower than 2 times. This is based on the value, but what about the trend? Trend of world exports for services and goods. From this figure number 12, for goods, we talk about peak point number 1 and trough point number 1. Another recovery, peak point number 2, stability and decreasing to the trough point number 2. Another recovery and peak point number 3. In this case, ups and downs, except the year 2011 or 2011 to the year 2014. This is a stable period in case of goods. What about services? Services more stable according to the world export volume. More stable. There is no ups and downs cleared in our figure for services, but it cleared in case of goods. So we can know that in case of goods, ups and downs and fluctuations in the world exports of goods, but there is a stable trend for trade or export of services. What about GATS? This is the second term in our lecture, GATS. GATS stands for the General Agreement on Trade and Services. General Agreement on Trade and Services. That is GATS. So, two terms, GATT and GATS. When we compare between GATT and GATS, what is the common between GATT and GATS? Use the same principles. GATT and GATS use the same principles. What about principles? MFN principle, national treatment principle, market access, and transparency. We talk about the same principles. But what about the differences between GATT and GATS? The first, GATS covers measures that affecting both the service and the supplier of this service. The first difference between GATT and GATS, GATS covers the measures affecting the service and the supplier of the service. But GATT only covered the product, not the supplier. GATT only covered the product or goods, not the supplier or the producer. GATS covered both of the supplier and the service. This is the first difference. What about the second? GATS covered 4 modes of supply. We will present in the next slides 4 modes of supply. But GATT covered only 1 mode of supply. Talk about the cross-border supply. Number 3, while the market access and national treatment are generally applicable obligations under the GATT, they apply under GATS on sector by sector. So, in case of GATS, there is a flexibility for each member to select which services or which main sectors of services the member ready to liberalize. But GATT, we talk about general. There is no flexibility in case of GATT or WTO recent from the year 1995. So the term scheduled list sectors, 2 schedules, positive and negative. What about the positive and negative? The positive list, which means the voluntary inclusion of a specific number of services sectors. In case of positive list, each member in the WTO select which sectors of services that the country or the member ready to liberalize. What about the negative list? In case of negative list, we talk about the limitation. The negative list equal the limitation that a country or the member add to specific sector. For example, suppose for Egypt select financial services to liberalize. So this included in the positive list. Egypt ready to liberalize the financial sector, financial service sector. But suppose Egypt limit the foreign ownership of commercial banks, for example, to 30%. In this case, this limitation add to the negative list. Any limitation add to the negative list. The next point, what about the numbers of sectors and subsectors, or actually number of services? There are 12 main sectors in GATS, include 155 services. 12 main sectors or categories covered 155 subsectors or actually services. For example, for the main sectors, when we talk about the business service, communication, construction, distribution services, educational services, environment, financial, health and the social services, tourism and culture and transport and other services. There are 12 main sectors. What about 155 services or subsectors? For example, when we select the financial sector, this is the main sector out of 12. What about subsectors when we talk about banking services and insurance? This is the subsectors and the main sectors. In the next point, when we talk about the topic or the services 4 modes of supply. Services 4 modes of supply. According to the trade in goods, there is no problem to export or import any product or any good or any commodity. from the exporter's port to the importer's port, or the exporter's point to the importer's point. But the main question now, how we can export and import a service? How we can export and import a service? The answer for this question is the service's 4 modes of supply. Mode number 1, cross-border supply. Mode number 2, consumption abroad. Mode number 3, commercial presence. And mode number 4, temporary movement of natural persons. How we can explain 4 modes by the following matrix. In 2 cases, we compare between the provider of a service, the same, the producer, the same, supplier. Provider equal producer equal supplier for a service. In this case, user, so 2 parts, provider of a service or supplier or producer. The second part, the user or consumer or client. User or consumer or client. 2 options, immobile and mobile. The provider may be immobile or non-move, and may be mobile or move. The same for user, probability number 1 immobile, probability number 2 mobile. So what about mode 1, or the first mode in the service 4 modes of supply? In case of mode 1, the provider or the supplier or the producer of a service immobile or no move. The same for user, immobile or no move. So how we can export or import to services, although there is immobile for the provider and immobile for a user? We can export and import to service by electronic communication. Electronic communication. Give me an example. Suppose you are Egyptian student and you live in Egypt and you register for training in the USA. But this training, online training, in this case, immobile from the American provider and immobile from the Egyptian user. In this case, mode number 1. Immobile from the provider, at the same time immobile from the user. What about mode number 2? Mode number 2. For a provider, the same, immobile. But for the user, there is a mobile for the user, or move from the user, or the client, or the customer. We can use the same or the last example, but in this case, it's the same. You are Egyptian student and register for training in the USA, but according to mode number 2, you will mobile or travel to USA to attend this training. You will travel or move or mobile to the USA to attend this training. In this case, mode number 2, consumption abroad. Mode number 2, consumption abroad. What about mode number 3? In case of mode number 3, the provider of a service, mobile or move, but the user immobile. There is no movement. In this case, suppose any international university or international bank like Bank of America open new branch in Egypt. So in this case, the provider for this service, mobile or travel or move to the user country or the user location. This is mode number 3, commercial presence. Commercial presence. In case of commercial presence, this is related to the foreign direct investment. Mood number 3 related to the foreign direct investment. What about mood 4? In case of mood 4, we talk about the natural persons or individuals, any movement for natural persons. But in this case, we don't talk about any firm. In case of mood 4, we talk about individual. We focus on the individual movement, persons movements. So, for example, suppose I am a teacher or I am a professor and I will travel to Saudi Arabia. I will travel to Saudi Arabia to teach. In this case, I am not a firm, I am a professor. So, in this case, mood number 4, natural persons movement. The next point, what about the financial services? Next point, what about the financial services? Financial services, one of the main sectors out of 12 in GATS. Covered subsectors like all insurance and insurance-related services. In case of all insurance, we talk about another sub, like life insurance and non-life insurance. What about banking and other financial services except the insurance? When we talk about the accepting deposits, loans, bank leasing, and all banking services. The last other financial services include any modern financial services, including in the other sector or the other item. Participants in case of the financial services, the same for any participants in the financial sector, like bankers association, brokers associations, and insurance, central bank, security and stock markets, regulators, all participants in the financial industry or the financial sectors, the same for financial services. The top 10 leading in the financial sector, in this case, in the top 10 leading of the financial services or the main exporters of financial services in the year 2019, number 1 USA, number 2 UK, Luxembourg, Germany, Singapore, Ireland, Switzerland, Hong Kong, France, Japan. What about the total? The top 10 shared about 81% of the world exports of financial services. USA and UK shared more than 40%, around 41% of the world exports of financial services. So, the global market of financial services, in this case, highly concentrated market. Thank you for your attention, and I hope this lecture gave you a lot of information about the world trading system, and goodbye.